Hello and welcome to AIL TV, but most importantly, welcome to Security Update. This is the program which analyzes, discusses and digests all matters to do with global terrorism. And as always, our host is David Otto from Global Risk International. He's going to introduce his guests who are expert on these matters. So, David Otto, you are on.
Welcome, Mr. Joseph. Thank you very much. Welcome to our guest. Today we have come to discuss the Africa Security Update. Again, we've made this program to be a weekly interactive program discussing and bringing together the best minds. This program has been generated, because there is a great need for the local communities, for the African diasporas, for the Africans who are based back home, for the United Kingdom and the other countries that are experiencing terrorism, to be able to share ideas. So we've made sure that we're selecting the best guests that we bring on this channel. So today we have two important guests who will be discussing the African connections to extremism. We came about this program because obviously there has been the unfortunate events, in the United Kingdom. One of the events, happened in Reading, where a knife-wielding gentleman, very young guy, the age of just 25 years old, actually went on a rampage, and stabbed people. After the lockdown measures, have been released. But also we will talk about the event that happened in Glasgow in West Street by 28 years old Adam Abala. He was a refugee from Sudan. And, unfortunately, he too was killed in this event. But we give our condolences to the 6 people and the police officer that were stabbed during this event. So I think it's important for us to, have this discussion on this event because, again, it brings us back to the African diaspora connection to extremism. But also it brings us to the point of talking about radicalization during the period of COVID-19, talking about radicalization during the period of Black Lives Matter, and how we can connect with the local communities, how we can talk to the local authorities, but also ensure that there is this kind of, semblance in terms of, the relationship building between communities and the police. We know from experience that the community is the police and the police is the community. Without the community, it is impossible for information and intelligence to flow to the police officers, to flow to the intelligence community for them to take action. So we will be looking at all these dynamics, and that is why we've selected these two gentlemen to be able to interact with you today and give you their own points of view. So we've got Mr. AKoman, who is a security specialist. He focuses a lot on African security issues. He looks at counterterrorism, violent extremism, how it relates to African countries. We've also have with you today a gentleman who has, been working not just in the United Kingdom, but he's had a lot of experience working in Africa. He's dealt with, the most, prominent jihadist organizations or notorious jihadist organizations, if you want to call them, in the Luptako Goma in Sahel. He's interacted with the top authorities, military authorities in Africa to give them his advice on how to tackle extremism. So Mr. Simon Cornwall, would give you his views. I mean, he's worked a lot within the PREVENT program in the United Kingdom, and he would tell you a lot about how these individuals, can, be interacted with, to prevent, further attacks from happening, and how the communities can also benefit from that. So welcome, Mr. Simon, and welcome, Alex, to the program. Let me start with you, Simon. You and I have interacted a lot, and we've talked about the PREVENT program, and we've talked about the role of the community in these kind of attacks. Because as you know, if the community doesn't give information to the police is unable to deal with this kind of threat. But I want you to give us your views, looking at these two events. Are these the kind of events which you think, is an expression of the breakdown of communication between the police and the communities?
Yeah, I think they're both very different. I'm going to talk about the one from Reading first. Nobody commits any sort of offence in isolation. There's a point that leads up to what happened, and there's a tipping point. There's something that drives them over the edge to do these things. Lots of people in society are upset, are angry, feel people aren't paying attention, feel they're marginalised, pushed to the edge of society. Quite often we suffer trauma through, failing relationships, business. COVID-19 really sort of exacerbated a lot of this, where people were trapped in his case, trapped in a small isolated house, and it was probably put really to him that he was failing, that life wasn't really how he wanted it to be, and he doesn't have an expression or a way to express that outwardly that he understands. So he goes for a knife and he stabs at people with it. So what brings it to that point? There has to be some way of convincing him that there's an alternative to that there are ways to express your anger, express your dissatisfaction. But certainly I believe the people in the community around him, he will probably be known, people have seen him about, and people may have said, oh, he's angry, there's that man who, oh, he looks a bit odd, he's this, he's that, or actually, you know what, he's normally really nice, I saw him yesterday and he looks really angry. What do they do with that? Where do they go with that? What you need for me, and what is missing quite often, is the local police, the neighbourhood police who know what is going on in their community, talk to people and listen to people. Quite often it's a conversation where people say, well, I'm a little bit worried about that. I heard some fighting, some noise. I heard this or that. I don't think this gentleman, is your sort of, it's difficult to know, but it doesn't sound like he's somebody who's come out. He's been looking at tons of videos. He's been listening to speeches from somebody like Daesh, from Al-Qaeda or something like that. He's been picking these things up and deciding he's going to go out there and commit some sort of atrocity on behalf of these groups. Yeah, he sounds very much like somebody who's is upset where he is in life. He's to express it, and I think he's come across his people in the park near him. I don't think he's targeting them because there's no evidence to me that I've seen he's targeting them because they're drinking or because they're white or different to him. He's just targeted people that are near him. He's gone out, and when he's gone after other people when they've run away, he's gone after other targets. So I think it's really an opportunistic thing in lots of ways. I think the issue here is how easy it is to kill people. You get a knife and slash at their throats, in their armpit, you can kill them very easily. And I think that's the sad thing that shows that these attacks, can kill many people very quickly. I think, and I think that's mirrored in some ways in Glasgow, that this person is much more about disaffection. And it's about mental health. It's just about something that's missing. I know with PREVENT that there is pilots in the UK, in Manchester, in Birmingham, England, putting the police and the PREVENT teams with mental health workers. So get them to work much more with people in the community who are maybe on the edge of mental health, who are these disaffected people living in hostels, not really being looked after very well, maybe feeling, particularly with COVID, that they're being pushed to the back of the queue. And remember, with the COVID, people are not necessarily getting the medication. Community mental health teams aren't able to go out and interact with people quite so easily. So there are people missing their medication. There are people missing their appointments. So these are things that are, exacerbated again through COVID.
Yeah, so let me just come to you there, because I think you've made some very important points. talk more about this, the gap which was created, because there's been a lot of focus. The government, after during the COVID-19 lockdown, rightfully so, has focused a lot on on the COVID-19 pandemic itself. Trying to get people to be economically empowered in such a way that people that are in lockdown, they can get food to eat, they can get the basic necessities. Do you think that it created a gap whereby the focus from looking at violent extremism was kind of in the back of the queue, and this gap has been exploited by jihadist organizations by dumping a lot of materials online? And if that is the case, should we be worried that we could see more cases?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the initial observation of COVID-19 to me is it's brought communities closer. People are helping each other, supporting each other, doing those sort of important things. But it very much isolates individuals who are already marginalized, already isolated. So individuals who may not come out of their house, their food may be left on their doorstep for them. They may not meet people. They may not talk to people. And going online, we talked earlier about technology, how it's the best thing and the worst thing. And people are going online and looking for things. And I think there has definitely been groups such as from the right wing and from the jihadist wing and other religious groups are upping their outpouring of videos, of speeches, looking at different things that are happening in the media and pumping it out there, really pushing their sort of views much more than they have done before. And I think people are now just looking for things online, searching for interesting things. The media has become very much about COVID. It's been very much about how the governments are doing. It's come very much how, what is Trump actually saying, not about what's going on in America. Africa, again, has been, certainly in the UK and on the sort of European news, about how people are infected and how they are affected by COVID. So terrorism has been pushed to the back of the queue. Certainly in the UK, there's been a drop in crime. And as soon as there's a drop in crime, people equate that to it not being such a risky place. Life isn't quite so dangerous. But actually, as lockdown begins to ease, as people come out, these people who have been subject to this almost battering by these sort of jihadi propagandist videos, by these right-wing extreme videos, are coming out of lockdown with that in their mind. And I think they, as I say, that this guy in Reading and the guy in Glasgow, they have these grievances and they don't know what to say about them or where to go with them. So they are listening repeatedly to, you should just go and take a knife and do this, go and drive a van, go and get a gun, go and do this. And it doesn't take, too much of that constantly going on. You think, what, actually it's right. With the COVID, what's going on, as I say, with the mental health, especially in this sort of lack of people being cared for. Not only the fact that they're open to much more propaganda, they're open to what's on YouTube, to looking at Facebook and all of these sites, and there is so much out there. I know you yourself look at what is on there, and it is certainly in the past 5-6 months, it has gone up steadily. Daesh are beginning to make a sort of comeback on putting out propaganda videos, particularly in Libya and places like this, and in Africa, Boko Haram are increasing their attacks massively. So there is something about how that is growing whilst everybody ignores it or whilst everybody moves in looking at other things. And I think also with the COVID, maybe the police and the army are not quite as active as they would have been, trying to look after themselves, trying to isolate themselves in some ways. Certainly in the UK, there are less police visibly out there, less armed police visibly out there. There is much less stop and search and things like that going on. And I think particularly in our country, I know we'll talk about weapons and things, stop and search is a massive tool. But we don't see it so much. So I think absolutely that people coming out of lockdown, there are a lot more people who have become vulnerable to this violent extremism, have now been looking at it fairly unchecked for several months, 3 months or so in the UK, certainly. And I think that is what, maybe we're beginning to see with these first couple of attacks. And I think it is the beginning, really, of this. And it's not only going to be the jihadists, it's going to be the right wing and those as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, which I'll get back to you, because what we've seen is that when you have an increase in what you call left-wing terrorism, from the Al-Qaeda and ISIS type or inspired terrorist attacks, then you'd see an increase in in right-wing extremists, also trying to balance, the scale, so to speak. But let me come to Alex, because Alex and I have talked a lot about the radicalization within African communities, the African diaspora communities, being radicalized, which fits into the discussion of today very well, talking about the African extremist connection. We have these two individuals, Alex. One of them, comes from Libya. Of course, the chaos that Libya is undergoing. After the overthrow of Mohammed Gaddafi in 2012. The other one comes from Sudan. Of course, the history of Sudan. Sudan, is one of those countries that in the 90s, was played host to Osama bin Laden, and then, of course, you've got the Al-Qaeda connection from Sudan, which led to attacks in countries like Tanzania and Kenya, in the U.S. embassies. So, coming back to these two individuals who carried out this attack, so they've got this history, but we're not saying, what we're not saying is that, everybody who comes from Sudan, has got, a terrorist background. But, this is a guy who comes from Sudan as an asylum seeker. Of course, the government has made it very clear that, this attack was not terror related.
Yeah.
Now, from your point, you've looked at motivation with Simon, and you look at his capability that he had, the knife that he used. Why should this attack not be classed as a terrorist attack when the one in Reading was classed as a terrorist attack? I mean, what's your opinion on all this?
Well, thanks, David. It's unfortunately we have these two cases happening almost a few days between each other's.
Yes.
The one in the Readings, perpetrated by a young boy, 25,
yes,
from Gaddafi, from Libya. And when you look at the background of this young man, from the age of 16, he was involved in the uprising against the regime of Gaddafi. So at this early age, he was exposed to atrocities, and he came out very damaged, He came to the UK very damaged. He was released from prison 16 days before he committed the atrocities in Reading. And before he's released, it was well established that he has mental health issues, And basically, this is the basis on which the judge decided to release him. He had post-traumatic stress and also personality disorder. So this young guy came out of prison, was under the supervision of the National Probationary Services. So they should have really put in place measures to look after him, to make sure that he does not fall. But unfortunately, something did not work to ensure that this guy get into the society, can start living a normal life. On top of that, we have the COVID lockdown, which have a lot of stress on almost everybody. And he wasn't living in Reading, but he was feeling lonely, and he moved to Reading few days before the attack. So he was looking for an area where he could be accepted. And unfortunately, the services which were in charge of looking after him, looking after his welfare, something did not really work, and they let him out by himself. And unfortunately, this happened, and 3 innocent people lost their lives, And then you look at the other one from Glasgow, Abdallah Adam, who is also a young person, 28, from Sudan. Again, an asylum seeker. Now, we know from various experiences that asylum seekers, the way they are treated can have detrimental effect on the well-being, And this young guy was moved to a hotel where the conditions were very difficult for them because I listened to the news and I heard one of the neighbors of Abdallah who expressed his views before even he attacked. He was not happy being in that environment. And also he raised some concern about how they need to be treated. They're not treated how they should have been treated, and they're not happy with the services provided within the hotel. Unfortunately, the concern was raised to the staff of the hotel, but they did not raise the alarm to connect with the police or to raise the alarm and contact the provisional services to ensure that they contact his concern. And then, unfortunately, again, he went on to stab 6 people and got shot by the police. But here, in both cases, we look at the situation as individuals in this country, and they are both immigrants from African background, both asylum seekers. So it points to the fact that how these individuals who are immigrants, who are asylum seekers in this country, how the state treats them to ensure that they can live a normal life. So these 2 incidents raise a concern, and the government should look at how they really treat this type of group, this group, and when they have measures in place, especially for Kari Abdallah Sadala, he was already known by the authority, by the MI5. So the supervisory system should have been looked at and ensure that he is taken care of. So roughly speaking, these young men coming from Africa had probably experienced difficult situations and are in the UK, and they don't get the support, or they haven't been given the support they deserve to be able to heal from the wounds they went through back home. And the isolation during the lockdown exacerbated the conditions. And as a result, they just lashed out, because if care was taken properly, these 2 cases, when you look at closely, these 2 attacks would have been avoided.
Yeah, but Mr. Alex, let me ask you a question which along those lines, which I think is important for our audience, which I'm sure, the question that the audience will want to know is, there are so many individuals that, yes, there are so many individuals that have been flagged. Yeah, that, there's a bit of, some technical issues there, Alex, so I think, let me just ask the question again. The audience would want to know, as you mentioned, that the police would have been able to, spot some of these individuals and make sure that they didn't commit these offenses. There are so many individuals who the police continuously monitor every day, people that are asylum seekers and people that are non-asylum seekers. How do you think, the police cannot be everywhere at the same time. How do you think this can be resolved without the help of the community? What is your thought on that?
Yes, it's quite straightforward. For the one in Reading, Kari, it should have been under the supervision of the National Probational Services. And they should have had a program to basically look after him on daily basis. And this would have been the way forward to ensure that his mental health issues are dealt with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he went on because he was feeling isolated, was feeling lonely, so he wasn't, as he thought, wasn't looked after. And obviously, material might be available online, and then he did not know maybe how to express himself. So he went as to take a revenge against, unfortunately, these ordinary people having good time in a park. So what needs to be looked at, and as I was saying earlier, the system, they have the police and also the probationary services. This guy was already on the radar of the MI5. So they need to ensure that, and this is not the first time, many people released without supervision have committed crimes previously. We have one which happened a few months back in London Bridge, who was released, should have been under supervision.
That's true.
And there was a lack of coordination of the activities within the system. So what needs to be happening based on these facts is that the probationary services need to reassess the way they take care of these people put under the care, so that these people cannot get hold of material which they can use to harm the public. So they need to be looked after for their own safety and also for the safety of the public in general. And here, in both cases, there is a failure, both in the Reading case and also in the case of Glasgow, Abdallah Adam. Abdallah wasn't under police investigation, but within the hotel, maybe because of a lockdown, his mental health issue, his mental ability deteriorated, and maybe he did not know where to go to, and he expressed his anger to one of his fellow asylum seekers within the hotel, because he expressed that he's feeling stabbing some people. And this young guy went to the reception of the hotel and reported what he has heard from this young person. So the probationary services, the immigration services, and people looking after this category of people should really be, I don't want to be alert, but take special care of people who have expressed concern. And in both cases, unfortunately, the information was not passed on to the police to make sure that they can come and help, or to the health services to come to the hotel and maybe take him to psychiatric hospital to look at what he can be provided with. So
let me hold you there, Alex, because you've made a very good point, that the police would have been able to put resources to make sure that these individuals did not get to the point at which they got to. They have been radicalized by one form of motivation or another, and they've been able to acquire their weapons. They've been able to find a target, which means an incident has happened. But let me come back to Simon, because Alex has made a very important point. And Simon, you and I have talked a lot about what happens in and outside prisons. Alex has mentioned that these individuals were known. Mm-hmm. Some of them were known to the security services. Some of them were known for their instability. And again, we've seen these kind of cases, as Alex mentioned. Mm-hmm. Now, the question to you is it a lack of resources, political will? Is it lack of expertise? Or are we just at the point at which we are so overwhelmed that we're just relying on luck? What is it that we're not doing? Or what is it that the authorities and the police are not doing inside and outside prisons?
Yeah, I think Alex made some good points there. I think Partnership work is probably the most crucial part to working with probation within prison. So you're working with the police, so you're working with housing groups, you're working with the NHS, mental health trusts, these sort of people. You know, probation officers are not experts in every field, so they look towards partners to support the work they do. So in this case, they will look towards their partners in mental health to help manage him. You know, and it's about those partnerships and where they are nowadays. I think there has been a breakdown in the way things are done. I think there has been cuts. We've seen austerity, things such as that. I think the political will maybe is not there to do things as they were. You know, you and I talk about this a lot, and I talk about mentoring. And I think it's having somebody separate from the process involved with the person. So, you know, these people would benefit from having a mentor who is neither a policeman, probation service, or anybody like that, but a member of the community. So somebody they can trust, somebody they see every day, who can help them navigate these difficulties in life. You know, as you say, they've come from Africa, they've come with trauma, they have all of these things going on inside. Their expectation maybe is a little bit heavy for what they're going to get in the UK, but, you know, that's their expectation. And you need somebody to translate what is happening to them. But actually, this is how life is in the UK. It's not something against them. It's not, you know, abnormal. It's how it is. But this is what we can do. Let's go and see somebody from the housing and see if we can get into a better room. Let's go and talk to the mental health people. Let's talk to your probation officer about helping you do a program around, you know, even just to help you get through life. A lot of people come out of prison and they need help in cooking, in living, you know, just living normal life. So it's about those partnerships. It's about those, when you grow a partnership with the police or mental health teams, it's how you carry those forward. I don't think that's being done. And I certainly don't think the mentoring is done as it should have been. You know, we talk about the London prison, the London Bridge attack and things like that. I think there were breakdowns in how things went. And I think what we need to do is bolster these partnerships, is to get people working together and moving forward. The probation service risk assess and manage people, and they do a very good job. And they're dealing with a lot of damaged and dangerous people day in, day out. And a lot of these people don't go on to recommit offences. So I think it's, you know, we can't be too critical of them. They do a very dangerous, a very difficult job. But there are times when they are with individuals where they need help and maybe they aren't getting that support. I think we had a bit of a perfect storm in that the police are not about, the probation service are not seeing people as they did before COVID, because obviously of transmission of disease, social distancing, these sorts of things. Mental health teams are not out and about. Maybe the people in the hostel or in the place where they were living were not as visual as they should have been. There will not have been so much interaction. And I think this is where it's very important that, you know, we talk about how prevent challenges these sort of ideas that actually you can't, you know, it's not my job, it's the police's job, it's MI5's job, it's their job, it's all our job. Yeah. Everybody is involved in this. So if you can train the people in the hostel, if you can train the people in the school, if you can train the people at work, what to do, how to look at terrorism, extremism as a vulnerability. So don't look at it as these people are terrorists, but these people are vulnerable to becoming terrorists. How do we turn them away from it? The Libyan, you know, the young Libyan man, if he could have been picked up earlier, if somebody had said, actually, you know what, he's unhappy, his health is suffering, and that could have been somebody who knows him well as a friend. I don't know if he went to a church or a mosque. It could have been something about that. I don't know about, you know, work and things like that, but people could have picked him up and said, we're worried about him, but they need somewhere to go, and how they can do that. In the UK, we have Prevent. And I know in other countries in Europe and in America, they're beginning to look at these ideas about Prevent. And that very early prevention is key to this. And it's that working in partnership and drawing together the things that Adam is saying, Alex is saying, were the issues here, and overcoming them. So not saying, actually, that's mental health's job. Actually, that's housing's job. That's their job. It's all our jobs. Let's work together to do that. So if the people in the housing unit had been trained about Prevent, understood about extremism, understood how that perfect storm things can drive people to do these things, they may have picked up on something and said, you know what, maybe I should tell somebody about this. And they may have come and spoken to them and moved away from it. But
yeah, let me get to you again, Simon, because you've mentioned a very key point here. You know, after the London Bridge attacks, the government made a decision that releasing people who have been accused of extremism or who have been engaged in extremism, is not going to be acceptable. That they would lock them up for a longer jail time.
Yeah.
Now we know that that is not the solution, because if you just lock somebody up, eventually they're going to come out.
Yeah.
Are you seeing a scenario where the government is experiencing, what I call a de-radicalization fatigue? In the thought that, people is unable for them to de-radicalize someone. Is that what you're saying?
We both know that de-radicalization has become big business, and there are big companies and big groups out there promising targets, promising programs, doing these things without the expertise, the background or the knowledge to do it. And in some cases, it's because of the money, and they're pumping out these programs. So it has become and moved away from, it's become this business, this fatigue of actually just put them through a program, they'll be fine. Individuals, these are human beings, and you can't just put them all on a program like a conveyor belt and they drop out the end and they're okay. If you lock them up for longer, they're still going to come out. It's going to make them angrier. You need to interact with them personally. So you need individuals to work with them. And it can't be, here's a program that works in the UK, let's sell it in Georgia, let's sell it in Azerbaijan, let's do it wherever. It doesn't work. The ideas of these de-radicalization, the ideas of how we can help and support people can be, but they have to be done locally. So it is about, in the UK particularly, finding a way of integrating, interacting, and getting people from the community to come and support. So I believe that this idea of mentoring and running little programs and things in the community to support the individual and their families and help them through these processes as they come here as immigrants, as they come through the prison service or whatever it is, to help them. You need a way of sort of looking at that from an assessment point of view. So looking at people who you're concerned about, who MI5 are concerned about, who the school are concerned about, and looking at what you can put them into. So, we have a thing called Channel in the UK. It's not a program. It doesn't have one size fits all. It has many different interventions, and they can be from helping somebody with housing, helping them with understanding language better, helping them access education, helping them build better relationships, understand the issues that they are talking about can be dealt with. A lot of people, this conflagration of religion and politics, but actually, you can pull them apart and understand it. So it's about sometimes just discussing and talking, communication, but it's finding a person who you legitimately believe can deliver the message. This is why I think mentoring is the idea that somebody can come to you and say, actually, I was a foreign fighter. Our good friend Hanif Gadir, I was a foreign fighter. I went to Afghanistan to fight the Americans. I learned I was wrong, and now I can tell you why. And the journey that you're on can resonate with my journey. And so they will listen to him because he has a legitimacy, because he's been down the same track.
Yes.
It's a complex, but sometimes it's a very simple thing. It's in the probation service, they use former drug users to counsel their drug users. So, they talk about how you can get off drugs and how you can live a drug-free life. It's the same, in essence, how you can come out of extremism and live an extremism-free life. Don't, feel that you have to be angry at everything, that your trauma can be dealt with and you can just be part of life and live the life you want to live.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Let me come to Alex, because, of course, Simon, you've talked about these issues of, the challenges that, we face, in trying to carry out de-radicalization programs in prison. And then you talked again about the issue of foreign fighters.
Yeah.
And we've seen that the collapse of the Islamic State caliphate, or so-called caliphate in Barkat, Mosul, has led to an influx of foreign fighters towards Libya. And then, from Libya, you've got these guys who have traveled towards Nigeria. They've gone to Mali. They've gone to Cameroon. Towards the borders, to Niger Republic, so Alex, in the UK, we talk about challenges in dealing with de-radicalization in prisons. In some of these areas that you've been to, that I've been to, and Simon has been to, they don't even have a structure to deal with, people that are extremists. How do you advise African countries to come up with a system that can deal with issues like this that we're facing in the UK?
Right. I think African countries did not have experience of extremists to go back 20 years back. But now things are changing fast based on how the world has become violent. So the authorities need to have a plan, put in place different professionals who can have a plan, and then based on those who have been identified and who might be in prison, for instance, we can have a plan to work with them to prepare them for life after prison, for instance, so that when they come out of prison, they know the reason why they went there, and they need to know now, based on the training they went through and the help and the support they get, when they come out of prison, they can resume, a life free of fear and terrorism. And this can be done if the willingness, the political willingness is there, and also if they are prepared to put some resources and listen to international professionals like Simon here who have been through these programs, so that they can work in partnership, governments, different government institutions, and also different governments across Africa can work together and have plans which can address the needs of these people who come off the plans, basically. And we have now various groups across Africa. In Mali, the situation is still there. Boko Haram is still terrorizing people in Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad. Al-Shabaab in Somalia is attacking Kenya, Somalia. And what needs to be done is the governments need to really have a coordinated approach, and not only the military fact, but also how to help these fighters come out of the vicious circle they are involved in. And most of the time is because these people have been brainwashed. They might not have a view or a profession or how they can live a professional life. So this government need to look at how to train these young people and then give them hope, so that when they live that life of a terror or terrorist, know that they can have a better life out of the mess they've been involved in. And if this is taken seriously, and if these actions are done across government and across different African governments, from Mali, Nigeria, Chad, Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, they can have a framework between all these countries and then implement it, the program they have, and monitor it maybe every 6 months, every year, and they can see how things are progressing or where there are failures. Obviously, they can assess and then make improvement. It's a long process, it's difficult, but they need to have a willingness to cooperate and put the resources in place to ensure that these young people move out of these terrorist activities, because they are lost, basically. They don't have a future. That's the reason why, the motivation. They see that, oh, because I'm Muslim, or because I'm from this region, or because I'm this community, we are neglected. No, but if the authorities take actions and put in place a clear plan, all these young guys across the different countries will stop even sympathizing with terrorism, because they start through the social media and then they meet those who recruit them, and those who recruit them try to woo them, basically, that, oh, if they're moving, the life will be better. So the government has to have a strategy to counterattack all these actions from those who are recruiting terrorists. And within a year, 2 years, the level of terrorism we are seeing now across Africa will reduce when the young people know that they will have a better life as an ordinary person, a professional person, rather than going into terrorism and risk everything.
Yeah, Alex, let me ask you a question on that. In 2014, 2014, I think that was about June, the Islamic State Corps had declared a so-called Islamic Caliphate in Raqqa and Mosul. Now, immediately that happened, you had the US coalition, you had, the UK, other Western powerful countries, Russia, they all deployed their forces. And, as you know, the Islamic Caliphate is no longer there physically. Now, look at the same thing which is happening in the Sahel region, where you've got Al-Qaeda's affiliate, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger Republic. You've got Al-Qaeda's affiliate operating in this region known as the disicuss. Chadian borders, as you mentioned. Now, in terms of the counter-terrorism effort, because we're talking about the global war on terror here, while the Islamic State has been defeated in Iraq and Syria, we can still see that in spite of the presence of the French Operation Barkhane, the French G7, the G5 Sahel that you're aware of, and there is also this European Union, called Takuba, Operation Takuba, or something like that, which is, translate to local language as SAND. They are all in this region. How come they've still not been able to destabilize, these jihadist movements, but instead they are growing stronger? Is it because they are not training the African forces properly, or is it because of some ulterior motives?
Right. To basically address these issues, military forces cannot resolve everything.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to have intelligence in place. They need to have people within the communities of the different countries where they're operating. They need to build relationship with the communities. And they need to explain the benefits of all these different groups working together to defeat the terrorists, because defeating the terrorists will benefit the whole community, the whole country. Unfortunately, there are not cooperations between these groups, and it's only the military side. The French, for instance, put an emphasis on, but military alone cannot resolve terrorist activities.
Yeah.
So there is a need to engage with the communities and get the community to trust the military.
Yeah.
And then the militaries also need to have a kind of discussion with the terrorists, because the terrorists are known, they have the headquarters, they have the leaders, and they need to have, look, in Afghanistan, the US refused to discuss with Taliban. But after so many years, now the Taliban are discussing with the American as well as with the Afghan authorities.
Yeah.
And this is the way forward. Because any group, whether they're a small or big group, can create chaos in a community. But when the authorities seize the opportunity and take action, not only just military action, and try to engage with those who are dissatisfied, because in Mali, that's the main reasons. Those from the north think that they are neglected, basically. They are not benefiting from the rule of the state. So they want to have their own authorities in the north. And it's up to the authorities to look at how they can have a kind of dialogue so that things can de-escalate instead of getting worse. And based on these actions, obviously, the grief can be addressed and solutions of problems of its local communities can be addressed. And as a result, there will be less terrorist activities.
Perfect.
This can be a plan.
Yeah. Let me hold you there because, we've got a couple of minutes to go. So let me first of all, get to Simon, because it's important that after listening to, your expertise, both of you talking about what is happening in the UK, what is happening in Africa, one of the things which is very clear is that when there is a terrorist attack, it is the local people, it is the ordinary people that, take the biggest impact of it. Yeah. What people also want to know is, how do you behave when you're outside? Do you guys have any kind of tips that you can give people on what to look out for in the event that there is somebody who is, planning to carry out an attack? Do you just go to the park? I mean, has time changed when people shouldn't just be relaxed? You can expect anything. I mean, Simon, I want you to talk about this first because you've got experience both in of course, in Africa as well as in the UK. What should people be really, changing at this point in time, especially people that, sometimes think, nobody's going to attack me? I mean, what is your advice, Simon?
Yeah, I think sadly that we live in a time where you have to be ever vigilant. Attacks happen everywhere and they happen to anybody. And we have to have, it's our own personal responsibility. We can't rely on other things happening. You have to think about what your actions are going to be before it comes to it. So I think about, would I stand up to somebody if they came at me and my family with a knife? How would I do that? If they came with a gun, it's a very different thing. There's not much choice there. But if I heard noise, if there was panic, how would I deal with that? And I talked to my family about listening to what's happening and where it's happening. Move away from noise. Don't get called into things. If people are panicking, running in a direction, wait a bit. Let it, listen for noise and that. If you hear gunshots or shouting or screaming, make sure you know where it's coming from. Particularly in a community, in houses, in blocks of flats, the sound can be coming from anywhere. Also, when you're out and about, if you're going shopping, now with the COVID, we're having to go down this alleyway. We can't mix with other people. We have to turn left, turn right. Be aware of where your exits are. It's like looking in case there's a fire or something happens. Make sure you can get out. And it's sad to think that you have to feel like that. But, if we talk that it's a community's response is the most important thing to this. Terrorists want to divide us and push us apart. If we can come together at that point, help each other, try and save victims, it's that takes away the power of the terrorists. So, I always think about it, the train where the guy pulled out a gun and the young men jumped on him. I can't quite remember where that was, but and they attacked him.
Yeah, Samuel, let me just get to you there. At what point do you run? At what point do you hide? Yeah. At what point do you fight?
I think you have to make a decision there and then. You have to decide beforehand. I'm a reasonably fit man. I think I'm okay, but I'm quite old. So I think if I'm going to fight with a young man with a knife, I really don't want to go there. I would rather move away, get away from it. So you have to make a decision beforehand. You have to think about these things now. Have a discussion with your family. If you're a man with children, are you going to stand and block the attack against your family while they escape? I think this idea that hiding is okay if you are sure of where you are and know you can lock yourself away, turn your phones off and hide, and that's fine. We saw in the London Bridge attack how the attackers tried to get into pubs, tried to get into restaurants and tried to find out people. And in the shopping centre in Africa where they hunted people down, essentially. So only hide if you are sure that you can hide away. Turn off your phones, do those sorts of things. But the best advice that I can give is to get away, to escape, to always be thinking of where you can get away from.
I think that's a very strong point. I think that's a very strong advice, Simon, to make sure that you can get away as quickly as possible, because once you get away, you don't get a confrontation.
Yeah.
And as you said very clearly, it all depends on the situation. There is no one size fits all. You can, and it also depends on where you are. So as you rightly said, it's important to always know where you're going, understand your environment, know where your exits are. Now, Alex, is it the same thing that you would say to the audience in terms of looking after themselves?
Yes, I just want to add this couple of points. You see, for instance, in Kenya, we've seen the attack of the mall.
Yeah.
And no, I mean, the attack a shopping center. The attack, I think a university where they went to the dormitory of a student. So we are at a critical moment. Our authorities need to make sure that, first of all, those who are in charge of the security of the country need to change the way they used to deal with things. So if they are on duty, they need to be on alert. When you have a shopping center where we have a couple of entrances, there is a need to control, because they know that Al-Shabaab, and in Kenya, for instance, there are a large community of Somalis, and any person can be a suspect. So they need to have measures to check, for instance, those who are going within these areas where you have large gathering of people. They need to look at the security system in schools, in universities, in hospitals, and try to upgrade how things are right now. There is a need to run sessions in communities to inform the communities about the new threat within any country, so that when something is happening, the authorities and the communities can, the local communities have an idea about what to do.
Yep.
So this is few things which can be done, and on top of that, have intelligence within the community.
Perfect, Mr.
Yeah.
I think you've made some very good points there. To conclude this matter, let me get to Simon, because today we've talked about the dynamics of terrorist activities in a Black Lives Matter environment. As you know, Simon, there is now these distrust between the local communities, especially the African communities, and the police. But not just the police, but also the system. How do you, we've just got 3 minutes. How do you advise that relationship is repaired? Because we need the police, and the police is always going to be there. How do you repair, this distrust that is happening between the Black community and the police in order for us to move forward?
Yeah, I think in 3 minutes that's a bit difficult, David, but I'll have a go.
Of course.
But I think it's very important about dialogue, and I think the Black Lives Matters have a very good way of getting out their point and talking about it. I think what happens then is it gets politicized, it gets hijacked by different people who want to use it for other, bring on other things, the support of Palestine, Hezbollah, things like this, and bring in different elements to it. And then other groups want to bring, fascist groups against them. So it's about trying to move away from all of that and get to the heart of the matter. And actually the government need to sit down and have a discussion with the people who represent Black Lives Matter to look at what they want, what their actual purpose is, but also do it with other groups that are out there. So we shouldn't just say Black Lives Matter, we need to listen to, Extinction Rebellion, we don't need to listen to, etc., etc. There are lots of groups out there protesting. UK, they can do that. They have their voice, but it's about what that takes us. The police need to remain independent so that they can police all of these actions and not appear to be, giving to one side or the other. And the government then need to stand behind them and say, from a governmental perspective, we're not taking the side, but tell us exactly what you want. What does Black Lives really want? It doesn't want the police defunding. It wants a look at how the police are dealing with race crime, race hate, those sorts of things, how police officers are dealt with if they have issues around brutality. That's what I believe Black Lives Matter is really about, is about this issue that the police in America are very brutal and they're almost militarized in the way they deal with their communities. In the UK, it's not anywhere near that.
Thank you.
But if we leave it unchecked, maybe it'll head that way. So it's about having that conversation about the police working with the community and for the community and being part of the community. Move away to them becoming a militarized, almost force of occupation that comes in when they need to do something, does all of their business, then leaves again, and you never see them.
Yeah.
You need to go back to those days of that sort of community policing.
Yeah. No, thank you, Simon. I think we'll revisit this subject. As you said, it needs a lot of time. Building this confidence takes time, so we've got to come back and talk about this. I really want to appreciate your expertise, Simon.
My pleasure.
Well, I really want to appreciate you, Mr. Alex AKoman, for your in-depth analysis on this subject matter.
Thank you.
We really want to thank the audience for listening to these experts, because as we say, we're facing very difficult times. And what we're trying to do in this program of Africa Security Update is to constantly inform the local communities of what is happening and to bring experts on board that can explain these things in very simple ways so that it can influence our behaviors and influence our attitudes. And we hope that, we will still be having these experts to come again and talk about issues a lot more in depth, so we really want to appreciate the audience of African in London's television. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Mr. Joseph, for your in-depth contribution to this program. We really appreciate. And I'm giving over to you, Mr. Joseph Otilman. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
We'll continue on YouTube. So if you have anything you want to contribute, please do so. You can send in your questions because this program is every Thursday from 6 p.m. So you can even send in questions or whatever you want to know earlier in advance so that the participants, because what we have here, we have got people who understand this issue about radicalization, global terrorism, everything that you want to know, whether it's in Africa, whether in Europe, or whether it is in the Middle East. You fire any question, they will answer it. So thank you for watching. Until next time, I will see you again Thursday next time. Thank you and...
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Simon.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you, Al. Good to meet you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.